today. Innovation and culture advisor, design thinker, and doer, leadership consultant, Margarita Maksimtseva, and an experienced lead coach and digital strategist, lecturer on design thinking, Anastasia Gramatchikova.
And I think you can see what I'm showing to you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes? Wonderful. Now I just...
Yes,
okay.
we are able to see you, yes.
And this is... okay. So I think this is the optimum what I can do. And I can even change slides here. Wonderful. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our session. My name is Anastasia. About me a little bit later, more. Just now, I'm inviting you to perceive this session as a jam session. Why? Because as a former classical musician, I'm allowing myself to use the music and some musical terminology to illustrate some points or some topics I'm going to share with you now. So I'm very hope that you are going to play with me on that. How can you join me in this session? So I'm inviting you to turn on your learning mode, your curiosity, probably prepare your keyboard to write something on the chat, and try to switch off your judgment machine in your head, if it's possible. I know it's quite challenging, because I'm inviting you to a little exploration around these topics. I'm very hope, and this is probably my main purpose, I'm not going to give you new answers, but I hope that what I'm sharing with you will raise some new questions around design thinking, and it's get you curious and interested, and you start to exploring even more around that. Okay, who we are, the dynamic duo on the stage today, Anastasia and Rita. We learned design thinking from the source, you could say that. So I'm a student of actually Uli Weinberg. He was a speaker yesterday here on the stage. So I was learning design thinking in School of Design Thinking in Potsdam. And Rita learned design thinking directly through the collaboration with IDEO. Very impressive. We together have quite a diverse background. So I'm a former musician, I'm a journalist, I am a digital strategist, and Rita is professional psychologist and absolute guru in cultural organizational change. Rita, I see you have your mic on.
I just want to say hi to everybody. Following our musical metaphors for today, I will be the backing vocals for Anastasia and mostly monitor our chat, but it's very great to be here, and I hope you enjoy the presentation, guys.
Thank you, Rita. Rita is my favorite collaborator. We are applying everything we know individually, all in collaboration in the field of innovation, human-centered design, design thinking, design doing, in a very literal, different constellation and forms as a facilitators, as trainers, and also with supporting teams with their projects. One of our collaboration result is this program, this innovation, certification, and design thinking program, which we designed for master's corporate education. What we basically teach there, these are 3 things. The first one is a variety of methods from human design, from lean in agile. We do it under the umbrella of the methodological frame design thinking, but mostly important, we are training the very specific skill set or the innovation muscles, as we call them, in order to successfully apply this framework and these methods. That's why the main topic of our session today is the skill set. So this is how our work normally looks like, so, or it used to be. Nowadays, it's mostly everything remote, but I can tell you the truth, that's what we're actually doing, right? So we are helping our participants to learn the language of innovation, starting to play that, and then we are helping them to perform on the stage. Yesterday was very inspirational talk by Mo Fox. She named it the theater of design thinking. So when you're already not on the workshop, later on the real life project, by facilitating the real life design thinking team, you are kind of on this stage. So we are helping participants and teams to be successful on the stage. That's why in the next 30 minutes in this little jam session, I'm going to cover 3 main topics. The one is let's take a look in the environment. Where are we actually in? What are we actually hacking? Then we will take a look on the design thinking and setting the stage with design thinking. And then we'll look at these skills, how to master this play. So let's start with the environment. And voila, we have the famous VUCA world. The description of the environment, where are we right now? It was before, due to the digital disruption and revolution, and now due to pandemic. And this concept, I think almost in all articles and all speeches, I don't know how you feel about it. I'm a little bit tired of VUCA world. That's why I'm suggesting the slightly different metaphor from the musical world. So the VUCA world in the music looks a little bit like that. So it's absolutely messy. It's a full cacophony around us. The rhythm is shuffled and ambivalent, and the speed of change, how the Italian says, say vivacissimo. So it's very, very fast and very flux. So when we are as a musicians in that environment, what we need to do, we not only need to navigate through this mess, we need to kind of catch this shuffled rhythm. We need to orient ourselves in this cacophony. We need to improvise in order to turn this mess into the masterpiece. What's very specific type of musicians actually doing. But later about that, first let's talk about this mess a little bit. This type of messy environment, Dave Snowden, in his framework, named as a complex environment. And I'm referring to the famous Kinevin framework, the framework which is beautifully visualizing different types of environments depending on the level of their complexity. And it's always better to learn from the source. So if you're interested, and it's very, very recommended for all of us who is in this world of innovation and organizational change to engage ourselves with this framework, better from the source. There are very good videos, Dave Snowden explaining and talking about his framework. The people who are often referring to that, and I'm one of those people, are tending to oversimplify that, which is very, very pity. Nevertheless, I'm doing that now. So just in order to make the illustration. So take a look on the top domains of this framework, the complex domain and complicated domain. Why? Because normally in the organizational context, we are operating on these top domains if it's not the emergency state. So what's the difference between the complex and the complicated domain? The difference is in the complicated domain, we know what we don't know. Therefore, this framework suggesting is very specific, the modus operandi, the sensing, analyzing, and responding. So when we know what we don't know, we can analyze, we can find the expertise, we can learn from the good practice, we can plan this good practice, we can apply that, and then we overcome the unknowns. It's actually what the symphony orchestra musicians are doing during their performance. In a complex environment, we don't know what we don't know. So this is a very high level of uncertainty. There are several layers of stakeholders. There are several systems involved. Therefore, not a good practice, and especially best practice, going to help you to overcome these unknowns. So therefore, as a different modus operandi is required: probing, sensing, and responding. So it's exactly what actually the jazz musicians are doing when they're improvising live on stage, without any musical sheets, without recipe, without any guidelines on any templates. They are navigating from this complex environment through probing, sensing, and responding. So what this framework is telling us, first of all, we need to differentiate between complexity of environments. And when we know that, we need to choose the different operational mode, different approach to decision making, and even a different mode for teamwork. Okay, we kind of sketch out the environment a little bit. Let's take a look at the design thinking, how the design thinking might help you to operate there. By the way, design thinking is not only one methodology. Almost all agile and lean frameworks and methodologies, from the nature of their teamwork constellations, the approach to collaboration, from the nature of their process, are purposely designed to support us in navigating in this complex environment. Why? Because in their process, this cycle of probing, sensing, and responding, and kind of an anchored. You can recall, for example, the build, measure, learn lean startup. It's actually mirroring of the probing, sensing, and responding. So design thinking process, if we look at the process, also mirroring that cycle. So I'm now taking this classical 6 bubbles visualization of design thinking process. Uli Weinberg yesterday showed like thousands visualizations, okay, hundreds visualizations of design thinking process. Nevertheless, almost behind all of them, the same principle. And this principle is 3 parts. The first, we're trying to explore the problem through understanding and observing, or we kind of the probing the field. Then we're making the synthesis, so we're defining the new point of view, or we're making sense out of this probing in the field. And then we're experimenting with our respondent. So that's exactly what is a process of design thinking suggesting to do. What's then the difference, what differentiates design thinking from other frameworks that are also applicable in this complex environment? It's a purpose. The purpose of this sensing, probing, sensing, and responding. So the purpose of design thinking, and now I'm quoting the Jeff Gothelf and his book, very good read, by the way, Lean, Agile, and Design Thinking. The design thinking aiming to answer the 2 fundamental questions. Are we solving a real problem for a real customer in a meaningful way? With other words, if I'm paraphrasing Steve Jobs, innovation is creativity that ships, then design thinking enables you to find out what to ship with creativity. How we do it? By bringing multidisciplinary team together, aligning them around a common purpose, and assisting them in uncovering real needs and the possible solutions that will solve those needs. That's one of my favorite descriptions of design thinking from Phil Gilbert, IBM Design, who actually named design thinking as a scientific method for 21st century. Me, as a design thinking evangelist, totally agree with that. So if we're talking about this design thinking stage or the building blocks of the framework, there are several of them. For example, yesterday, again, Uli Weinberg mentioned this people play process approach to understanding the framework. I am showing you today slightly different visualizations. So here we see 3 essential blocks of the framework design thinking. And the first one is human centricity. So design thinking always starts with discovering and exploring human needs, human values through empathy, and very important, through qualitative anthropological research. Everything we do in design thinking are based in research. How we do it basing on experimentation and iteration. So the way of working in design thinking is prototype driven and driven by our curiosity. And we do it in a multidisciplinary team constellation. So collaboration or radical collaboration is another important key. And it means that all decisions are made are participatory decisions. All creations are made are participatory co-creation. And collaboration not only within the team, the collaboration with partners, collaboration with different stakeholders, and collaboration with our users. Okay, so we kind of already at the third part of our little concerto. So we're going to start to talk about the mastering the play. I suggest we do a little break or a little intermission. So I have a question for you. On this Prince scale, how do you feel right now? You remember we have a chat function. You can write there. So how do you feel right now? From 1 to 12. If you're not ready to write it on the chat, it's absolutely okay. You just sense yourself how you're feeling. It's actually very important.
Our first reply is a 12, so.
Yes, I know that I'm talking very quickly. I know probably there is some information on the slides and you are not able to read everything through. You know, I asked actually for 2 hours, but I got just 30 minutes. So
we have some happy faces as well, so
okay.
There's a good mix.
Okay, good. Wonderful. By the way, it's a very good digital warm-up activity you can use in your remote sessions, because in remote, using visualizations, one of the very important keys. Okay, wonderful. Then let's think about how do we feel when we're actually applying design thinking on the real life stage. So then the feelings look slightly different. Yeah, so on a Marilyn Manson scale. And if you experienced some of these feelings, I have good news and bad news for you. The good news, you are not alone. So I'm doing it longer than 12 years. And believe me, I'm experiencing all of these feelings almost all the time. If you ask again the jazz musicians what they experiences on stage, it is that. This is the fear and anxiety and frustration. Very often it is kind of a part of the game. And there is a bad news. These feelings are not going away. So they are gonna accompany you. But with the time, with the training, the skills, how to deal with that, what you can achieve, you can actually turn these feelings of frustration not into the joy, but also into the source of creativity. And that is exactly what we are trying to achieve when we are training our muscles. When I'm mentioning muscles, so you can see them on the screen, there's at least 9, it's probably more. I just crystallized 9 of them. There's some very specific skills that are helping you to master this probe, sense, and respond, modus operandi. And as you can see, there are behind these words are quite big concepts, like, for example, empathy, system thinking, critical reasoning, radical creativity. This is a very big concept. What we're doing in our trainings, on the one hand, we are looking very deeply into each of these concepts because it's important for us to understand very often from psychological and neuropsychological point of view, what is actually going on, how our brains work in order to understand how these concepts work. On the other hand, behind these concepts are very specific behaviors or very specific practical behaviors we can actually apply and train every day in order to become better in these concepts and in these skills. So yes, this is just a bonus. As you can see, almost all of the skills are named by World Economic Forum as the top 10 skills of 2025, and I believe 2050 as well. So when you're when you're training design thinking, applying design thinking, you're kind of training yourself for the future. So today I'm going to share with you just 3. There's 3, I call them buttons, but actually these little behavior techniques, little practices, you can apply directly after the session or after this conference to start literally a little bit hacking the mess around us. So before we start, I'm inviting you for one experiment. I stole this experiment with pride, or how we call it in design thinking, build on ideas of others. This is perception experience from brilliant neuropsychologist Bolotto. And I'm just repeating exactly what he is doing. There are a lot of talks and videos with him if you're interested. So I'm giving you a task. Please read what you see. Remember, read what you see. So this is the first one. Please read what you see. Probably it's quite easy. So I'm giving you another task. Please read what you see. You are doing very well. And just because we are calling from Barcelona, some Spanish language, please read what you see. And finally, please read what you see. So if you read something like a sentence here, for example, what are you reading, or any other English sentence, then I have good news for you, my friends, you failed the task, because the task was read what you see. And there are no words here. So we're not seeing words. These are just letters. So why you read this way? Because in your previous experience, you have an experience of putting the specific letters in a specific order within your experience of English language. And another reason was I gave you a task, read what you see. So you probably saw, what are you reading? So I kind of redirected your attention. So there are some more possibilities. Some of you might see, what are you dreaming? So fill the spaces differently. So what is this little perception experiments telling us? That's actually how we perceive the world, influencing directly how we interact with this world and how we innovate. According to Bolotto, the creativity and innovation starts with our perception. Our perception and our brain is grounded in our history. So with simple words, everything what we see around us, it's only things that we already know. So just imagine, we see only things that we already know. It means that for us, for humans, it's highly challenging to think and see differently. Therefore, we need to go out of our perception bubble, overcome our perception bias, and it's challenging. So the one essential skill in design thinking, what we're applying only on almost every step, is challenge your assumption constantly. This is a hard task. Why? Because when we were small, it was very natural for us to be open, to make mistakes, to experiment, to have this so-called beginner's mind. When we became adult, big experts, got a lot of knowledge, this expertise, this our knowledge, our perception of the world kind of staying on our way. It's hard to learn if you already know. It's unfortunately important to unlearn in order to learn something new. So we constantly training in design thinking the ability to unlearn and challenge your assumption. For that, I'm inviting you to try the so-called EDIT button. You can literally imagine that in your head, you press the button, the EDIT button, and at this moment, you're setting all your opinions, all your judgment, all your expertise, all your solutioning, everything aside, and you just reading what you're seeing around you. You can actually practice directly after the session. You can go out, take 3-5 minutes, just press the EDIT button and try to absorb everything around you without judgment. Experience. How do you feel about this? Right after all, to us about your finding through this little exercise. So what is challenging? It's challenging to not only not judge. It's challenging to allow ourselves to make mistakes. It's challenging to ask questions. We kind of forgot how to do that. That's why in design thinking, we're again starting with this mindset of questioning. So we're basically questioning everything. And this is one of the ways to help to challenge your assumption. Again, you can start it immediately. For example, in your next conversation, instead of thinking of your opinion, you can ask, why? Or you can ask, okay, tell me more. How did you feel about it? Right? So go out of your perception bias. Or if you're facing any difficulties or something like, okay, we don't have time, we don't have money, we tried this, it didn't work. Okay, try to rephrase that one with a question. How might we? How might we create time? How might we encourage them to join us? How might we transform fear into creativity? Because nothing interesting actually begins with knowing. We're always looking for questions, not for an answer. It's again the Bolota, the neuroscientist I'm referring to today quite a lot. What are we actually trying to understand with our questions in design thinking? I already mentioned, we're trying to understand what is the real problem. We're spending more than 80% of all the time in the process by exploring exactly that. Or if I use the design thinking terminology, we're not using the word problem, we're using the word need. So we're trying to understand very specific needs that triggering specific human behavior in a specific context of this problem. That's why I'm having another invitation for you. Read what you see or try to observe this picture and try to observe what kind of need is seeing here. In this case, it's quite obvious. It's, by the way, very real picture. I took it 3 days ago here on Montjuic. So that's a real situation. It's a wonderful illustration how often also we are people creating our workarounds. And for innovation, it's sometimes good enough just to observe without any judgment to see that. So it's obviously that here's a need to give the water to our animal friends, right? So I have a solution for you. This is one of the innovation in a drinking fountain industry, addressing directly that need. But we're also trying in design thinking, look in every need and every problem in the part of the system. There are probably more stakeholders, more different users that are experiencing this need. So the solution might look like that. So this one already addressing several stakeholders. But if we look even broader, that's why system thinking actually comes into play. Then we can include some trends or some environmental changes or the time changes. So then your solution can look like that. So if you see, it's just an illustration how the discovery of the need and thinking as is a part of the system are influencing your solution. But it's all not enough. And if you probably can sense, it's kind of the light motive of the everything what I'm talking today. And I call it a mantra of in design thinking, or at least it's my personal mantra. It's not about you. So it's not about you when you are on the field and you try to explore and discover. It's not about you when you're coming back and we are trying to make sense all of this data. It's about your user, and it's not about you when you're part of the team. So you need to put your ego aside. So we even have the agency, design thinking agency in Berlin with the name What Would Harry Do? And this is a metaphor for Harry as a user, because each time we don't know what to decide, we ask ourselves, what would our user do? It's not about me. And in order to do that, we need another button, another behavior, another skill, and it's empathy. The empathy, and in this case, I'm not only meaning then asking 5 whys when you're actually doing the interview, it's much more. The empathy is a quality of the presence of other people. The empathy is the ability to be vulnerable, the ability to put all of your opinions and perceptions and egos aside and be with other people, sense their pain, sense their frustration, and sense and try to understand their worldview in order later on to create solution for them. And this is hard. This is one of the most hard skills that we are facing in our work. And it's most the essential skill for so-called WQ. Uli Weinberg was talking about this. This is essential skill for collaboration. It's essential skill for leadership in an innovation world. And even though it's hard, it's very rewarding. Then you can have the solutions like this one. This is a wonderful, heartwarming illustration of the design idea last year, beginning of the pandemic, by the observing that not everybody needs the standard mask. There are some other needs around. Because the main point of the design in design thinking was born out of the science of design and art is actually to create something that is changing the existing situation for the better one. But you can ask, what is with uncertainty? We are still not kind of on that topic. The probing, sensing, and responding, the process itself increases the uncertainty in us. Why? Because when we are in this process, when we are in the process of innovation, we are kind of feeling being in a black box. In a black box with no light, we cannot know what any of our actions is gonna result. Right? So, and we're kind of trying to find the button to switch on light. By the way, there is no one button, right? So we kind of, during this process of discovery, uncovering step by step little light sources that are gonna light up the whole room at the end of the process. And our best friends in this discovery is anxiety and fear. Again, because our brain is actually doing everything to avoid uncertainty. But there is actually one human activity that can tolerate the uncertainty, that actually not only tolerating, it's celebrating the uncertainty. It's also creating possibility. It's intrinsically, naturally pushing us to be collaborative and motivative. And this activity, you might guess, it's play. Just imagine, when you're playing with your friends, you actually don't know about this, don't care about the solution. You don't know what's going to happen at the end. You are enjoying the process. And you don't know what's going to happen next. So you're in the uncertainty. Or imagine you are listening to a joke. Yeah, so the point of the joke, not knowing what is going to happen at the end. So honestly, we can learn about innovation and design thinking much more from stand-up comedians, from jazz musicians, and from neuroscientists than from design thinking books, right? And if we add an intention to this play, an intention in design thinking is a question. If we add some rules to this play and it's a framework, then we have an experiment, nothing else but probing, sensing, and responding. So with other words, design thinking is highly effective play with intention. Therefore, our third important button that we're training is a play button. And with play, I'm not only meaning playing with Post-its and Lego. You might think, guilty, we do that. But that's not only our playground, right? In design thinking, we're playing. We're playing with beginner's mind and expert mind. We're playing with changing the perspective, with space, with methods, with diverging and converging the process, the creative and an analytical approach to the information. So they're playing constantly. And the playing good is hard because it requires you to be concentrated all the time. And only this type of playing actually enabling you to turn this mess into the masterpiece. Okay, just because it was so fun being here and I have still 2 minutes, I have one bonus button and I have a question for you. I was talking almost 30 minutes, right? So if you would imagine you have learned something in these 25 minutes? What would it be? What's your learning from this? Please write it on the chat. And I know that our brain is constantly in judging mode. We're comparing with what we know. We're thinking about the future. Now I'm inviting you to switch off the mode. I'm inviting you to actually think about, okay, what I'm taking out of this, if it would be one thing.
And while we wait for people to post some things in the chat, just for you, Anastasia, because you were busy giving the presentation, we're having some comments about some of the frameworks we've used. So I've shared some articles, guys. It's getting a little scientific over here. So we're exploring things. People are interested in things like motivation and how it drives innovation and performance in innovation. So I will share our LinkedIn profiles at the end of this presentation if you would want to reach out and get some screenshots of the slides that we referenced or whatever. Feel free to reach out. So some of the things people are sharing in chat is the buttons approach, right? The 3 buttons. And something else comes now is to not be judgmental and turn into being intentional. Push the right buttons. The idiot button is quite popular. Very redefining the universe. Very ambitious.
Yeah, why not?
It's the way to go. And then replacing the problem world with the need was quite opening for some people.
Play like
there is no tomorrow.
Yes, so
amazing.
Let's train the learn button. You see, the learn button is the ability to everything what we're experiencing, everything what we do turn into the learning. This is the main hack that you can even have in the uncertain world. Why? Because everything is a prototype. I'm sharing with you my favorite quote from Phil Gilbert again. Everything is a prototype. Today is a prototype for tomorrow. So I can learn from today and I can be better tomorrow. So thank you very much.